Hello, friends. Welcome back to Reality Check with Arvind Swaminathan. I am Arvind Swaminathan, and this is the third video in our series. And I hope you'll enjoy this one too. Today, let's discuss one thing which is prevalent in India, and that is we must understand that everything foreign is not necessarily the best. In fact, in many instances, it is definitely something to our detriment. Now, until we get this through into our heads, we're not really going to progress. This time, the example I'm going to use for this is paddy or rice farming. Many years ago, we're talking about 1968, 70, 74. We were very short of rice, and we were trying to become self-sufficient in rice production with the help of foreign agencies, especially in this instance, the Ford Foundation. Now, I joined the Ford Foundation in 1969, their IADP project, which is the Intensive Agricultural Development Program. And it was basically, apart from Punjab and northern India, it was to do with rice and rice production. Now, the one thing against this, which eventually we did manage to get across, they had imported a variety known as IR8. And I don't mean the Ford Foundation, probably the government of India was responsible for this. Now, IR8 was a variety which was bred in the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines, said to be the wonder rice or the miracle rice. It was imported here, and they were trying to put this in every rice acre possible. This IR8 came with a package of practices, especially the fertilizer recommendations, which were 100, 50, 50, that's NPK. Most of us would understand this, I hope. The result was I was based in Chhattisgarh at the university there doing an experiment with weed control. But basically, it was also to do with rice production. Now, I used these recommendations, but the point is that because of a slight accident would happen, I'd used 1.5 times the nitrogen dose. The result was there to see because my yields were 1.5 times higher than the rest of the university farm. Now, it was difficult to understand why did this happen, except the first doubt that the recommendations may not be quite what they should be. After this, before the results were fully analyzed, I was transferred to Delhi office, where I went through a great deal of literature in the Ford Foundation Library and one or two other places. Eventually, my father arranged for me to meet some of the bigwigs in ICAR, meaning the Indian Council for Agricultural Research. And while speaking to them, one of them gave me one piece of paper, which perhaps he shouldn't have. It was to do with the release of two new varieties, BC5 and BC6. Now, this I carried home and put it on my bedside table. Went to sleep. 2 in the morning, I woke up. And boy, this was what is known as a Eureka Moment. And when I say Eureka Moment, it really was big. It really was big. Because I realized why research people were getting 7, 8, 10 tons per hectare in terms of yield, and farmers were only getting 5 tons a hectare, even though they were supposed to be using the same recommendations. The reason being, as you do with all experiments, you take a soil test first, and then do the rest of your experiments based on that soil test. Now, most research institutes had done the soil test and then ignored it or forgotten about it. The result is most of these research stations were using soil which was giving you, as in this piece of paper, 6.6 tons in terms of yield, without applying any nitrogen at all. Whereas farmers, after applying the full dose of fertilizer, were getting only 5 tons per hectare in terms of yield. Now, at this 5 ton per hectare yield level, it was not economical to grow it because they were getting far more in terms of cash yields, growing their old traditional varieties using their old traditional methods. And this was something which a farmer told me after much persuasion, which is something I couldn't understand until he explained all this to me. That look, IR8 was a very coarse grained variety and fetched a very low price on the market, whereas his local variety, which he was growing regularly for sale in the market, was a fine grained variety. And the difference in price was 300 tons, 300 rupees per ton for IR8 and 700 to 800 rupees a ton for these local fine grain varieties. That was why he was getting more in terms of cash income by growing his old variety. Now, if he was making less money growing IR8, why should he grow it? Were foreign or imported varieties ever needed? I don't think so. What I came across just redoubled my belief. In quite a few instances, it was found that local varieties out-yielded or at least yielded as much as this much touted IR8 if given the same conditions and the same fertilizer and the same care. This is something which people just refuse to believe. And for some reason which I'll never understand, except this basic belief if anything is imported, it's better. Which is something I hope we can get out of our systems and very quickly. You see, most of these local varieties were suited to their local areas, both in terms of disease and pest resistance, as well as the duration needed. Because in many areas you needed a 155-day variety, some areas you needed a 180-day variety, others 60 or 90 days or 100 days. IR8 was only a 135-day variety. And in many areas, it just didn't fit in. It didn't make sense to use it. Not only that, this was being a coarse grain variety, did not fetch as much income for producers as a fine grain variety, which was a local product. So I still don't understand why people were trying to push this new coarse grain variety. Now, local varieties had a very big flaw. They would grow too tall and lodge, which means loss in yield. Now, nobody tried to figure out why did this happen. For one thing, the spacing was all wrong. You use closer spacing, not a 20 by 20, but a 15 by 10 spacing. That itself will shorten the plant height. The other way of shortening the plant height is put only 2 inches of water as recommended for IR8 in the field rather than 18 inches of water, which is the normal practice. Now, once all this happens, automatically the plant height decreases. The plant is stronger, it doesn't lodge quite so easily. So these were not insurmountable problems to most farmers, but nobody ever thought of them. It was always get a foreign variety, it's better. In conclusion, what can I say? Except pay attention to local varieties, not just plants but animals and anything else you want. Try and nurture local varieties to see what are they capable of producing. They are capable of producing a lot more than we give them credit for. As these rice experiments did show, but it was played down. The fact that local varieties could yield as much, if not more than this so-called imported IR8 and at a much higher price because they were fine grain varieties. We have to come out of this, how shall I put it, a time warp that everything foreign is necessarily better. It isn't. Quite often, it is much worse than anything we have here at the moment, except we don't want to give them credit for it. Well, folks, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one too. Please, if you like it, press the bell icon, share this with friends, relatives, family, and may I take this opportunity of wishing you, all of you, a very happy Diwali. See you soon. See you soon.